Okay, mainline games. Let's see. We have red, blue, gold, silver, crystal, ruby, L. Yep, we have all of them here, and they're in a very weird order. I'm going to fix that quickly. Black should be over here. Okay, there we go. So, same deal as last time. Won't play. Might play. Less than 50%. Okay, let's get these ones out of the road. So, I put all of Gen 1 and Gen 2 in here for a reason. So, the Gen 1 games are broken as hell, and they are very different to how the newer games play. I don't think that I could go back and play them since I'm so used to newer mechanics. I appreciate them for what they are, but I do not want to play them. It's a similar story for Gold and Silver. There are newer versions of the games that have the more recent mechanics, so I'll leave it there. So next would be the ones that I haven't beaten enough to rate them fairly. Oh wait, I forgot. I didn't play the Ultra games, and I don't have any interest in playing them, nor the Shining and Brilliant, or whatever the Pearl one was. Shining Diamond, and I've got the originals, and I didn't feel like dropping money on them. And I think other than the introduction of Fairy, they play pretty much the same. I don't think I spelled that right. Oh well. That isn't how you spell bad. Okay, we'll leave it like that. So, in order to be fair to the games, the pairs, I'm just going to rate them the same. So if I put Fire Red in one category, Leaf Green is going to go with it, just as an example. So we'll start with Ruby and Sapphire, which are the first two mainline games that I played, or at least I think they're the first two. I either played Ruby or Fire Red first, but I know that Ruby was the first one I beat. Where do I want to put Ruby? I feel like I want to put it in bad. The reason being, you've got a couple of very big stone walls, particularly Norman, which makes Ruby and Sapphire some tough games, and your selection of Pokemon is kind of limited. It's also reasonably easy to get through, so again, I don't mind the games. They do have a place in my heart, so to put it. But going back to them, since you still have moves tied to type, it could be a little rough. But this is the introduction of abilities. We have the split between special attack and special defense. So you could go back and play them, but it's rough. I'm going to put Fire Red and Leaf Green in the same category for pretty much the same reasons. They're probably the best version of Kanto that we have. I know we've got the Let's Go games, but we'll get to them. Emerald. I want to deal with Emerald separately. As far as the games go, Emerald has more stuff than Ruby and Sapphire. It has a changed up. Its Pokemon are changed up. Gym leaders are different, so I want to put it in Might Play. Simply because I haven't actually played Emerald. Ha ha ha. And just to save time, Platinum's going there as well. Diamond and Pearl. Oof. The fact that there are so few fire type in Diamond and Pearl is kind of an issue because it limits what your fire type is and kind of hamstrings team building. The other thing is that the top of Mount Coronet is a pain in the neck. I'm going to put them in bad. It also, while I say like Platinum would probably be a good game, because it fixes up a lot of the issues. It adds in more Pokemon to the Pokedex. You have a lot of extra little content added in, and they do change up the gym leaders a bit. Or at least their Pokemon and the order that you fight them in. So if you want to play a Gen 4 game, like out of Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, or the remakes, I'd say go play Platinum. Heart Gold and Soul Silver, terrible. Just flat out terrible. The leveling curve is very slow and shallow. They're very easy to play. Most of the gym leaders are a joke in the first half. So the game can feel very easy. And then you get to the end where you want to do the red fight because it's felt so easy up to this point. And they have so many HM requirements to climb. HMs, while not too much of an issue, that climb to fight the best trainer in the game, requiring, I think you need Surf, Waterfall, Rock Climb, and either Rock Smash or Strength. So essentially you need 4 HMs. And of those, maybe Surf is the only one that you want because you still have... No, we have the physical special split, so Waterfall is a physical move, Surf is a special move. Okay. Black, White, Black 2, and White 2. Oh dear. So the story in these games are probably the most extravagant that Pokemon has done up to this point in terms of the timeline, and because of the backlash that Black and White got for various things, stories weren't as big of a thing in the Pokemon games going afterwards, particularly with how X and Y didn't do well because its story was lackluster, and people weren't happy with the story in Sun and Moon and the Ultras. So yeah, that's why Sword and Shield has such a backseat story for the most part. So Black and White didn't do too much to change the boat, but its experience system is what's going to put it in terrible. So Black and White 2 have a very specific system with with experience, which is unique to the Gen 5 games. As you level up, you get less experience from lower level Pokemon. It's basically an anti-grinding mechanic, which is so annoying. It wasn't needed. It just makes it harder to build Pokemon up, and if you have a small party, you essentially are hamstringing the potential experience that Pokemon can get. So you may want to play once, but never more than once. As far as randomizers go, Black and White are the Gen 5 are your last pixel art generations. All the ones from them and earlier are able to do randomizers and modifiers for, and one of the things you can do with it is get rid of that mechanic. So for less than legal reasons, if you're wanting to do ROM hacks of a pre-Gen 6 game, Black and White are a good choice. Or the Black and White 2 games. Do not do randomizers of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Because the low leveling curve and low level Pokemon stats are more important between whether you win a fight or lose, it's a nightmare. Okay, moving on to the next game. We've got X and Y. X and Y is the introduction of Fairy type, which is really nice. I'm going to add another row just below. Other side. So this is just the other game in the series, so I'm going to put just the partner games down here. Just so that it's easier to see the other games. Ugh. Okay. So the ones I've left in here are the actual copy that I played. So moving on to X and Y. So X and Y, you've got the introduction of Fairy in the attempt to rebalance the game. A bunch of moves were added, and it's like a real sort of overhaul of a lot of like battle mechanics, trying to improve EVs and IVs. But overall, it is such a boring game. The story is bland. Most of the fights are pushovers, and you just suddenly beat the champion. Like, out of all the games I've played, Y's champion is the most forgettable, and is just, wait, we had that fight? The villain's also kind of forgettable. In fact, the whole of Y is pretty forgettable, other than the fact that it had Mega Evolutions. I feel like this is biased. Ruby is terrible. No, the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I say this is biased because technically it belongs here. I could not beat the fight on Mount Chimney with the boss, I think it's Magma, and the reason being was that my Pokemon, despite being higher level, seemed to have garbage stats. So I don't know if Gen 6 they started giving trainer, or at least key trainers, proper IV and EV spreads or something. But that fight, despite using the same team that I'd used back in Ruby, I couldn't beat. Hell, I was even using my starter. I dropped my starter early on in Ruby. So I can't work out how I couldn't beat that fight, but yeah, that's why I put it here. But I'd still consider Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire pretty terrible games. They're very much a retread with some nice features, but other than that, yeah. Ultra regular Sun and Moon. So I didn't play Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and I don't have an interest because it's the same game with just like some cosmetic differences, as I understand it. And Sun and Moon have been like, they've been fun at times, so I want to put them in pass. The change up to gyms to being these very specific challenges rather than just a gym fight is a nice change up. But what they did for the game, they can't really ever do again. So it's a pass. It's not a bad game, but it's not like anything excellent. I definitely don't feel the urge, however, to play through Moon ever again. And part of that is Pokemon often burns me out from it. Eevee, I haven't done enough of it. It is fun to play through Johto again, and the change up of the overworld encounters, which we do see in Arceus and possibly the next game that they've announced. What was it? It was colors again. It was like Scarlet and Violet. That was introduced here, which came from the Pokemon Go series. So that was fun. It's definitely novel. And if you haven't played a Johto game and are willing to try something new on a Switch rather than try and track down a way to play Fire Red, go for it with the Let's Go games. I just prefer Eevee over Pikachu because screw Pikachu. God. Okay, Sword and Shield. So, not counting the Let's Go games, Sword and Shield are the first mainline ones on a console. Everything before this has been handheld, and Sword and Shield have some very rough patches. The whole Dynamax, Gigantamax, whatever, is kind of boring, and I beat the game without using it ever. So let that be a lesson to it. It is not a very difficult game, except when you do the champion refight. Because you don't get to fight him the first time, there is a sudden level jump after the credits. It jumps up like 5. My team was a horrible matchup because he has a lot of like good coverage and a favoritism for like some really hard to break Pokemon. I think he has 2 pseudo legendaries, which is kind of insane. But overall, Shield is a pretty easy game. And as far as like not counting the DLC stuff, it's got a sort of limited pool in what Pokemon it has. And I feel like using the DLC to say, oh, it's got more Pokemon, it's got more content, it's better, isn't a fair point. Because all the other games have had to live up on just their own content. So, yeah. Sword and Shield, fine. Playing through it once. Wouldn't want to play it again. Now we get to Legends, which I'm still playing through, but I'm more than halfway. So where do we put Legends? I feel like I'm lying to everyone, but briefly. But yeah, Legends is a pretty excellent game, but I'd actually have to move it down to great to be fair to it. So Legends, as far as like a Pokemon game, is actually a terrible Pokemon game. But it is a great game nonetheless, and here's why it's a terrible Pokemon game. There are little to no actual Pokemon fights. You can actually play through the game doing very little battles. You don't need to do gym fights. Hell, the big Pokemon, the Guardians, you don't even need to use Pokemon to beat them. I've beaten one without using Pokemon at all, and I'd realized that the one earlier that you can get away without having to use Pokemon to fight them. So essentially, Legends is a great game, but you don't need to use the mechanics that make Pokemon a game in it. And so that's why I feel it's not excellent. I know that feels like I'm like being very nitpicky, but to be fair, none of the Pokemon games got higher than pass at this point. So if I don't be nitpicky, I feel like I'm like, how do you put it? Being biased to the game. Like, the movement is fun. Transport Pokemon has been a great idea since they came in Sun and Moon. Getting rid of the HMs was the best thing they could have done. The game, as you play it, feels like it opens up naturally, as opposed to what a lot of the other Pokemon games do, and you have very clear roadblocks. The open areas, again, something that was introduced in Sword and Shield, feel better than they did there, and I feel that because of the ride Pokemon and being able to climb up areas in manners that you shouldn't, that adds to the exploration. But again, battles are very minimal. But that said, like, Legends does a lot of stuff to overhaul the battle system. You have the strong and agile moves. Turns aren't just opponent you, opponent you. It's more of a action turn, not an action turn, an action commodity. So you can get multiple attacks in before the opponent does. You can use an agile move to try and get more attacks, or a strong move sacrificing a turn to do more power. And I feel that's a great mechanic, particularly since it costs extra move points in order to perform them. I know what they're technically called. I'm going to avoid using that word if I can. The other big overhaul is they've gotten rid of the IVs and EVs, which is great. Individual and effort value points were a pain in the neck. For a casual player, they were meaningless. For people who were into competitive play, they were just a nightmare of a hurdle, considering that having a Pokemon with bad IVs basically means you had to throw it out and start over again. With the system that they have now, where similar to how you can just build XP and give them XP candy and that to just level them up, you now also have, I believe it's called Grit Powder, which you can just put onto a Pokemon's stats and level those stats up individually, irrespective of combat. So that is great. That gets rid of a lot of the problems, but it keeps the mechanic of you can modify the stats of a Pokemon by how you want to train them. So I think the next game that comes out, if it takes the lessons from Arceus, like these good points. It could be another great, possibly excellent game. I wouldn't hold my breath though. This is the Pokemon Company. And as you can see, they haven't put out a good Pokemon style Pokemon game. Oh. Oh dear. I think the thing that comes to it at the end is that if you've played one Pokemon game, you've pretty much experienced every other Pokemon game. Each one has its own gimmick. And some have more Pokemon, some have less. Some have better variety, and some are very limited in what variety they have. It really comes down to, are the fights fun? Are the gyms or their equivalent, Sun and Moon, and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, any good? And that's kind of where the problem lies, is that a lot of them, the gyms are very samey up until you start getting to Black and White. And even then, like, I can't think of any standout gyms. Not at the moment. I might be because I'm sleepy, but not really at the moment. And I feel like that's one of the big problems, is that Pokemon tries to be an RPG and a puzzle game. When it does puzzles well, it really doesn't. It never does its puzzles well for the gyms, and its fighting or its battle mechanics have been very limiting because of their one-on-one nature. Double battles was a great thing, but it's barely ever used outside of like competitive and a couple of very specific fights. Legends often throws you in situations of 2-on-1 or multiple on 1. So I feel like there is potential growth for the battle system from what we've seen from Arceus. But yeah, that's where I sit with Pokemon, or the Pokemon games.